The crystal chandeliers of the Riverside Country Club cast dancing shadows across 150 guests as they celebrated my parents' 30th wedding anniversary. Everyone who mattered in our city's business community was there. Mayors, CEOs, judges, and the kind of old money families that shaped policy over golf games and charity galas. I stood near the bar in my understated navy dress, watching the familiar theater unfold. My older sister Sarah commanded the center of the ballroom in her designer gown, surrounded by admirers congratulating her on another successful quarter at her marketing agency. Her husband Michael, a prominent real estate developer, held court near the champagne fountain, discussing his latest luxury hotel project with potential investors. Meanwhile, I nursed a sparkling water and observed from the periphery, just another face in the crowd of successful people celebrating the Anderson family legacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. Everyone in this room knew Sarah Anderson Mitchell as the brilliant entrepreneur who'd built Pinnacle Marketing into a $50 million agency. They knew Michael as the visionary behind the city's most prestigious developments. They knew my parents as the power couple who'd raised such exceptional children. What they didn't know was that I owned the buildings where half of these businesses operated. I owned the investment firm that had funded Michael's hotel project. I owned the media companies that had made Sarah's agency so successful. And as of 30 minutes ago, I owned Thompson Industries, the manufacturing giant my father had spent his entire career dreaming of acquiring. But none of that mattered tonight. Tonight was about celebrating the Anderson family success story, and I was just supporting cast in that particular drama. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC's voice echoed through the ballroom. Please welcome our hosts for the evening, Richard and Margaret Anderson. Applause filled the room as my parents took the stage, both glowing with the kind of confidence that comes from 30 years of shared success. Dad looked distinguished in his custom tuxedo, every inch the respected business leader who'd built Anderson Manufacturing from a small machine shop into one of the region's premier industrial companies. Mom radiated elegance in her silver gown, the perfect partner who'd supported his rise while building her own reputation as a philanthropist and community leader. Thank you all for being here tonight, Dad began, his voice carrying easily through the room. 30 years ago, Margaret and I promised to build something beautiful together. Looking around this room tonight, seeing all of you, our friends, our colleagues, our family, I think we've succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. More applause. More validation of the Anderson legacy. We've been blessed with wonderful daughters, Dad continued, his eyes finding Sarah near the front of the crowd. Sarah has built one of the most successful marketing agencies in the Southwest, and she's married to Michael, who's transforming our city's skyline with his innovative developments. The spotlight followed Dad's gaze to Sarah, who beamed under the attention. Michael raised his champagne glass in acknowledgement, basking in the recognition. But success isn't just about business, Dad went on, warming to his theme. It's about family, community, making a difference in the lives of others. Sarah embodies all of those values. She's not just successful, she's made us proud every single day. The applause was thunderous. Sarah actually curtsied, playing to the crowd with the natural charisma that had made her such an effective businesswoman. I took another sip of sparkling water and checked my phone. A text from my assistant. Thompson acquisition finalized. Press release going out in the morning. Congratulations, Ms. Anderson. Thompson Industries, the crown jewel of regional manufacturing, the company Dad had been trying to buy for 15 years. The acquisition that would have made Anderson Manufacturing the undisputed leader in industrial production across 3 states. Dad had no idea his younger daughter had just outbid him by $200 million. You know, Dad continued his speech, his voice taking on a more personal tone, people often ask Margaret and me what we're most proud of after 30 years of marriage. Is it the business success? The community recognition? The financial security? He paused dramatically, looking around the room with the timing of someone who'd given many speeches over the years. And the answer is always the same, he said, his voice full of emotion. We're most proud that we raised a daughter who exemplifies everything we value. Intelligence, drive, integrity, the ability to build something meaningful and lasting. Another pause. Another moment for the crowd to appreciate the sentiment. So tonight, as we celebrate 30 years of marriage, I want to raise a toast to our greatest achievement. Dad lifted his champagne flute high. To Sarah Anderson Mitchell, proof that the Anderson legacy will continue for generations to come. The room erupted. 150 successful people rose to their feet, applauding the golden daughter who'd made her parents so proud. Sarah pressed her hands to her heart, tears glistening in her eyes as she accepted the adoration. I remained seated, invisible in the sea of standing ovations. "We have one successful daughter," Dad declared over the applause, his voice ringing with pride. "And she's everything we could have asked for." The words hit like a physical blow. Not two successful daughters. Not daughters who've both found their own paths to success. One successful daughter. I smiled politely and applauded along with everyone else, playing my part in the family theater. Around me, business leaders who'd never bothered to learn my name clapped enthusiastically for the Anderson daughter who mattered. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my assistant. "Wall Street Journal wants a statement about the Thompson acquisition. Should I mention this makes Meridian Holdings the largest private industrial conglomerate in the region?" I typed back quickly, "No comment until tomorrow. Keep acquisition details confidential for now." Meridian Holdings. The investment company I'd built in secret over the past 8 years, acquiring undervalued manufacturing companies and turning them into industry leaders. 23 companies across 6 states, including the steel foundry that supplied Dad's business, the logistics company that handled his shipping, and now Thompson Industries, the prize he'd been chasing his entire career. But tonight wasn't about Meridian Holdings or strategic acquisitions or the $3.4 billion industrial empire I'd built while everyone thought I was finding myself after college. Tonight was about celebrating the one successful Anderson daughter. "Emma." A familiar voice cut through my thoughts. I turned to see Mrs. Patterson, one of Mom's closest friends, approaching with the kind of bright smile usually reserved for children and pets. "Mrs. Patterson," I replied warmly. "You look lovely tonight." "Thank you, dear. And how are you? I feel like I never see you at these events anymore." The polite fiction that I'd ever been visible at family events hung between us. "I'm well, thank you. How's Mr. Patterson's retirement treating him?" "Oh, you know him. He can't sit still. He's been talking about maybe starting a small consulting business, helping other executives transition out of corporate life." She paused delicately. "Actually, that might be something you could relate to. Didn't you try something like that after college?" The question was innocent enough, but it carried the weight of 8 years of family mythology. Emma, the younger daughter who'd never quite found her footing. Emma, who'd started some kind of business consulting thing that nobody really understood. Emma, who was still figuring things out, while her successful sister built an empire. "I'm still involved in business consulting," I said simply. "That's wonderful. It's so important to have interests, even if they don't lead anywhere substantial. Margaret always says how proud she is that you keep trying different things. Keep trying." As if building a $3.4 billion company was just another hobby I'd eventually abandon when something more interesting came along. "Emma helps companies with efficiency and strategy," Mrs. Patterson continued, clearly trying to be supportive. "I think it's admirable when young people want to help others, even in small ways." Small ways. I'd helped restructure the manufacturing operations of 17 companies, creating over 8,000 jobs and increasing productivity by an average of 340%. "But sure, small ways. That's very kind of you to say," I replied. "Of course, it must be challenging to compete with Sarah's success. Her agency is doing so well and Michael's developments are just stunning. They're such a power couple." The comparison was inevitable. Every conversation about my life eventually circled back to how I measured against Sarah's achievements. "Sarah has built something impressive," I agreed. "Oh, absolutely. And you know there's no shame in not being the entrepreneur type. Some people are meant to lead and some people are meant to support. Both roles are important." Support. As if my role in the family was to quietly applaud while the real achievers took center stage. My phone buzzed with another message. This time it was from my chief financial officer. "Thompson integration meeting scheduled for Thursday. This acquisition puts us in direct competition with Anderson Manufacturing in 3 key sectors. Should we prepare a competitive analysis?" I stared at the message, processing the implications. By acquiring Thompson Industries, Meridian Holdings had just become Anderson Manufacturing's biggest threat. Dad's company, the business he'd spent 30 years building, was now competing against his younger daughter's industrial empire. And he had no idea. Emma. Mrs. Patterson's voice brought me back to the conversation. I was asking about your dating life. Any special someone? The personal questions always followed the career disappointment. As if my inability to achieve Sarah-level success could be explained by my failure to find an appropriate husband. I'm focused on my work right now, I said. Of course, but sometimes meeting the right person can provide the stability that helps us find our true calling. Look at Sarah. She and Michael are such a team. They support each other's ambitions. They're very fortunate, I agreed. And they're talking about children soon. Can you imagine Margaret as a grandmother? She's going to be absolutely delighted. Grandchildren. Another metric by which my success would be measured and found lacking. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the stage. Dad was tapping his champagne flute again, calling for attention. Before we move on to dancing, he announced, I want to share some exciting news with all of you. The room quieted with the anticipation that comes when successful people promise insider information. As many of you know, Dad continued, Anderson Manufacturing has been pursuing an acquisition that would transform our company and secure our position as the dominant industrial manufacturer in the region. My stomach clenched. Surely he wasn't about to announce the Thompson deal. Surely he didn't think. For 15 years, Dad went on, I've been trying to acquire Thompson Industries. It's been my white whale, the deal that would cement Anderson Manufacturing's legacy for the next generation. Oh no. Well, I'm happy to announce that after months of negotiations, we've finally reached an agreement in principle to acquire Thompson Industries. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Business leaders who understood the significance of the deal rose to their feet. Sarah beamed with pride. Mom clasped her hands together with delight. But I knew something they didn't. There was no agreement in principle. Thompson Industries had been sold 30 minutes ago to Meridian Holdings for $850 million, $200 million more than Anderson Manufacturing had offered. Dad was announcing a deal that didn't exist. The acquisition will make Anderson Manufacturing the largest industrial conglomerate in the region, Dad continued, his voice full of pride. It's the culmination of everything I've worked for, and it ensures that the company will be strong enough to support the next generation of Anderson leadership. He looked directly at Sarah, the implication clear. The expanded company would eventually be hers to run, the crown jewel of the Anderson family empire. My phone buzzed again. A message from the lawyer handling the Thompson acquisition. Seller confirms they received multiple offers, but Meridian Holdings' cash offer was impossible to refuse. Other bidders being notified now. I closed my eyes, realizing what was about to happen. The final paperwork should be completed within the week, Dad continued, and we'll begin integration immediately. Thompson's manufacturing capacity combined with Anderson's expertise will create opportunities we've never had before. The applause continued. Guests pressed forward to congratulate Dad on his business coup. Sarah accepted praise for being part of such a successful family. Mom glowed with the reflected glory of her husband's achievement. That's when Dad's phone rang. The distinctive tone of his business line cut through the celebration like a knife. Dad frowned, clearly annoyed by the interruption, but the caller ID must have shown something important because he answered immediately. Richard Anderson, he said into the phone, his voice still carrying the confidence of someone announcing a major victory. The room remained buzzing with conversation, but I found myself watching Dad's face as he listened to whoever was on the other end of the call. His expression shifted from confident to confused to concerned in the span of about 10 seconds. What do you mean they accepted another offer? Dad's voice was still relatively quiet, but in the acoustics of the ballroom, his words carried farther than he probably intended. The conversations around him began to quiet as people noticed his distress. But we had an agreement in principle, Dad continued, his voice rising slightly. We shook hands on this deal. We discussed terms. How can they accept another offer? The room was going silent now, 150 guests sensing drama. 850 million? Dad's voice cracked slightly. Cash? Who has that kind of cash available for an immediate acquisition? My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Meridian Holdings? Dad repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Who the hell is Meridian Holdings? The silence in the ballroom was now complete. 150 successful people watching Richard Anderson realize his dream deal had just evaporated. I need to know everything about this Meridian Holdings, Dad said into the phone, his earlier confidence completely gone. Who owns it? How did they get the financing? Why wasn't I told they were bidding? He listened for another moment, his face growing pale. A private acquisition company? Based here in the city? That's impossible. I know every major player in this market. There's no company with that kind of capital that I haven't heard of. The irony was excruciating. Dad was standing in a room full of business leaders, many of whom operated out of buildings I owned, demanding to know about a company he could have learned about simply by asking his younger daughter. Find out who owns Meridian Holdings, Dad said firmly. I want a full report on my desk by tomorrow morning. Someone just outbid me by $200 million and I need to know who they are. He ended the call and looked around the silent ballroom, his face a mixture of embarrassment and rage. Well, he said, attempting to regain his composure, it seems there's been a development in the Thompson situation. The understatement of the evening. Another company has apparently acquired Thompson Industries, Dad continued, his voice tight with controlled emotion. A company called Meridian Holdings that none of us seem to know anything about. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Business leaders exchanged glances trying to place the name. Sarah looked confused. Mom appeared stricken. But don't worry, Dad said, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. This is just a temporary setback. Anderson Manufacturing has weathered challenges before and we'll weather this one too. The applause that followed was polite but lackluster. The energy had gone out of the celebration, replaced by the awkward tension that comes when someone's public triumph becomes a public humiliation. I checked my phone one more time. A new message from my assistant. Press release is live. Wall Street Journal, Forbes and TechCrunch all picked it up. Meridian Holdings officially announced as new owner of Thompson Industries. Phone is ringing off the hook for interviews. I typed back, no interviews until next week. Send standard statement about strategic growth and job creation. Around me the party was trying to resume normal conversation, but the damage was done. Dad's moment of triumph had become a moment of defeat, witnessed by everyone who mattered in his professional world. Emma, a voice beside me said. I turned to find my college roommate Jessica, one of the few people at the party who actually knew me rather than just knowing of me. Jessica, I didn't know you were here tonight. Your mom invited me through the Alumni Association. I'm on the board now. He paused, studying my face. That was brutal. Your dad looked like he'd been punched. Business is unpredictable, I said carefully. $850 million, Jessica whistled softly. That's serious money. Do you know anything about this Meridian Holdings company? The question I'd been dreading all evening. I've heard of them, I said, which was technically true. Apparently they're based here in the city, which is wild. How do you hide a company with that kind of capital in a market this small? Maybe they weren't trying to hide, I suggested. Maybe people just weren't paying attention. Jessica gave me a sharp look. You sound like you know more about this than you're letting on. Before I could respond, Sarah appeared beside us, her earlier glow completely gone. There you are. Mom wants the family to stick together right now. Dad's pretty shaken up. Of course, I said. Is there anything I can do to help? Sarah's laugh had a bitter edge. Unless you happen to know who owns this mysterious Meridian Holdings company, I don't think there's much any of us can do. The moment stretched between us, loaded with 8 years of assumptions and misunderstandings. Actually, I said quietly, I do know who owns Meridian Holdings. Both Sarah and Jessica stared at me. What do you mean you know? Sarah's voice carried disbelief. I mean, I know who the owner is. Who? Jessica asked immediately. I looked around the ballroom at the 150 guests who had just witnessed my father's public humiliation. I looked at Sarah, who had spent the evening basking in praise for being the one successful Anderson daughter. I looked toward the stage where Dad was still trying to salvage his dignity while Mom stood beside him looking lost. Me, I said simply. I own Meridian Holdings. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Sarah's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, realization, shock. You. Her voice came out as a whisper. You bought Thompson Industries? I nodded. For $850 million? It was a fair price for the assets and market position. But, Sarah struggled to find words, you're a business consultant. You help companies with efficiency. You don't have $850 million. I've been building Meridian Holdings for 8 years, I explained. We specialize in acquiring undervalued manufacturing companies and optimizing their operations using advanced data analytics and supply chain integration. Building it. Jessica's voice was barely audible. Emma, are you saying you own $1 billion company? Approximately $3.4 billion in total assets as of this quarter, I said. Thompson Industries brings that to just over $4 billion. The number seemed to physically impact Sarah. She took a step backward, her hand reaching for Jessica's arm for support. $4 billion. Sarah repeated. You own a $4 billion company? I built it from nothing, I said. Started with a single acquisition 8 years ago and reinvested every profit into new acquisitions. 24 companies now, including the steel foundry that supplies Dad's raw materials and the logistics company that handles his shipping. Sarah's face went white. You own Dad's suppliers? Among others. But why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were just doing consulting work? The question I'd been expecting for years. When was I supposed to tell you? I asked. During Dad's speeches about having one successful daughter? During your lectures about finding a real career? During tonight's toast where he literally said he was proud of raising a daughter, singular, who embodied success. The truth settled over Sarah like a heavy weight. For 8 years, I continued, every family gathering has been an opportunity for all of you to celebrate Sarah's achievements while treating me like a charity case. When was I supposed to interrupt that narrative to mention that I'd built something larger than all of your businesses combined? Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to find words. You want to know the really ironic part? I asked. Pinnacle Marketing's 3 biggest clients are companies owned by Meridian Holdings. Your success is literally built on contracts with my subsidiaries. The color drained completely from Sarah's face. And Michael's hotel project? The financing came from Meridian Capital, my investment arm. I've been inadvertently funding your husband's developments for 2 years. Sarah made a sound that wasn't quite a gasp and wasn't quite a sob. So when Dad toasted to having one successful daughter tonight, I said gently, he was standing in a room where I own the venue, addressing an audience that included executives from 17 of my subsidiaries, celebrating a daughter whose business depends on contracts I approve. Jessica had been silent through this entire exchange, but now she spoke up. Emma, this is insane. You're talking about being one of the most successful business owners in the region, and you've been invisible for 8 years. I wasn't invisible, I corrected. I was dismissed. There's a difference. Sarah finally found her voice. But the Thompson acquisition. Dad's been trying to buy that company for 15 years. It was his dream. I know. I grew up hearing about it. And you bought it anyway? I bought it because it made strategic sense for Meridian Holdings' vertical integration goals. Dad's emotional attachment to the deal wasn't part of my business calculation. The coldness in my own voice surprised me. Emma, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, what have we done? Before I could answer, Mom appeared beside us, looking frazzled and desperate. Girls, thank goodness. Your father is beside himself. This Meridian Holdings situation has completely blindsided him. Sarah, do you know anyone in your business network who might have information about them? Sarah looked at me, then at Mom, then back at me. Mom, Sarah said slowly, Emma knows who owns Meridian Holdings. Really? Mom's face lit up with hope. Emma, do you think you could reach out to them? Maybe explain the situation? Your father had a handshake agreement with Thompson Industries. Maybe if they understood the history, they might be willing to negotiate some kind of partnership. The request hung in the air between us. Mom, I said gently, I can't reach out to Meridian Holdings about Dad's situation. Why not? Emma, this could destroy your father's business. If you know someone who might help. Because I am Meridian Holdings, I said quietly. I'm the one who bought Thompson Industries. Mom stared at me for a long moment, her face cycling through the same expressions Sarah's had shown minutes earlier. What do you mean? She asked finally. I mean, I own the company that outbid Dad. I'm the mysterious competitor he's been asking about. I'm the reason his dream deal fell through. Mom's legs seemed to give out slightly. She reached for a nearby chair, sinking into it with the look of someone whose entire understanding of reality had just shifted. You, she whispered. You bought Thompson Industries for $850 million? I nodded. But you're... She struggled to find words. You're Emma. You do consulting work. You live in that little apartment and drive that old car and I built a $4 billion industrial empire while you all assumed I was failing at life. I finished. The three women stared at me, my mother, my sister, and my college roommate, trying to reconcile the Emma they thought they knew with the Emma who had just revealed herself. 4 billion. Mom repeated faintly. Give or take. But why didn't you tell us? The same question everyone kept asking. Tell you what, Mom? Tell you that your assumptions about my life were completely wrong? Tell you that while you were apologizing to your friends for having a daughter who couldn't find her way, I was building one of the most successful companies in the region. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Emma, we never meant. You did mean it, I said gently. Tonight, Dad stood on that stage and toasted to having one successful daughter. But in front of 150 people, he made it clear that only Sarah had achieved anything worth celebrating. But if we had known. Known what? That I was worth celebrating too? That maybe your younger daughter had found a different path to success? That maybe your definition of achievement was too narrow? The conversation was interrupted by Dad's voice, amplified by the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice strained but determined, I want to assure everyone that Anderson Manufacturing remains strong despite tonight's setback. We will continue to pursue growth opportunities and maintain our position as a leader in regional manufacturing. The applause was polite but unenthusiastic. Everyone could see he was trying to salvage a celebration that had turned into a public relations nightmare. In fact, Dad continued, I want to use this moment to announce that Anderson Manufacturing will be doubling down on innovation and expansion. We may have lost one opportunity, but there will be others. I felt a pang of something, not quite guilt but recognition of the pain I'd inadvertently caused. Mom, I said quietly, I need to tell Dad. Tell him what? Everything. About Meridian Holdings, about the Thompson acquisition, about why his dream deal fell through. Mom's face went pale. Emma, that will destroy him. Finding out that his own daughter outbid him. It will break his heart. He's going to find out eventually. The business community is too small to keep this secret forever. Sarah had been silent through this exchange, but now she spoke up. Emma, there has to be another way. Some way to fix this without humiliating Dad in front of all these people. I looked around the ballroom at the guests who were trying to pretend they couldn't sense the family drama unfolding. At Dad on the stage, still trying to project confidence despite his obvious devastation. At Mom and Sarah, both looking at me like I held the power to save or destroy everything. Maybe I did. There is one way, I said slowly. What? Sarah asked immediately. Thompson Industries doesn't have to remain a Meridian Holdings subsidiary forever. If Dad's really serious about pursuing innovation and expansion, maybe Anderson Manufacturing and Meridian Holdings could explore a partnership. Hope flickered in Mom's eyes. What kind of partnership? The kind where Anderson Manufacturing becomes a subsidiary of Meridian Holdings, I said. Dad keeps running the day-to-day operations, maintains his title and his team, but gains access to the resources and capital of a $4 billion parent company. Would you do that? Sarah asked. After everything we've said, everything we've assumed about you, would you really save Dad's business? I considered the question. 8 years of being dismissed, overlooked and underestimated. 8 years of watching my family celebrate success while treating me like a charity case. 8 years of building something extraordinary while everyone assumed I was failing. I would consider it, I said finally. But it would require some changes in how this family views success. And some long overdue conversations about assumptions and respect. Mom was crying now, tears of relief and regret mixing together. Emma, I'm so sorry. We've been so wrong about everything. You haven't been wrong about everything, I said. Sarah has built something impressive with Pinnacle Marketing. Michael's developments really are transforming the city. Dad created a successful company from nothing. Those are all real achievements worth celebrating. But we never celebrated yours, Sarah said quietly. No, I agreed. You didn't. The acknowledgement hung between us, heavy with years of missed opportunities and misunderstood conversations. "What happens now?" Mom asked. I looked toward the stage where Dad was still trying to salvage his dignity, then back at my family who was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "Now," I said, "we figure out how to move forward. All of us." The party continued around us, but something fundamental had shifted. The Anderson family story had been rewritten in the span of 30 minutes, and none of us would ever see each other the same way again. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations, complex negotiations, and the challenge of rebuilding relationships based on truth rather than assumptions. But for the first time in 8 years, I felt like I might finally have the family I'd always wanted. One that could see me for who I actually was rather than who they thought I should be. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth more than all the acquisitions in the world.